I'm just going to, Joanne is going to focus on people's goals and get a little bit of input about that and what obstacles there may be and how to counteract those obstacles. I think that's, that's a big thing. Okay.
And we all have them. We all, at whatever level we find ourselves, we all have goals and obstacles. And I think it's probably safe to say we all feel that we're not good enough, because wherever we are, whatever we've accomplished, we tend to look at the people who are more accomplished and say, oh, I'll never be able to do that. And it happens at every level. So I wanted to give you a little bit of assurance that those obstacles, everyone has them. So I want to try to get as much as I can in the first 15 minutes. And I think, Sharon, because of your responses, I have a pretty good handle on what you're doing. And that was wonderful. And I think, Jade, I need a little bit more. You're writing a science fiction for kids. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, I mean, it's fictional, but it's gonna be based on scientific fact about the global warming. It takes place, the setting, as we talked about last week, is very important. Sierra Nevada mountain range. So it's actually about a family of the American pika, and how so you've got the predator and prey going on, then you have the global warming going on.
Okay, so that's not science fiction.
Right, it's science-based, but it's a fictional story because it's a children's book. It's made up with the character. Yes, okay.
It's narrative nonfiction.
Oh, narrative nonfiction, okay.
Based on science.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, because when I looked at the first notes, it was kind of like science fiction, and that's a completely different thing than what you just told me. Yes. So I hope that's helpful. Let me just build on that. Let me just build on that to say one of the biggest obstacles we run into is that we're not clear on our genre, so we don't know what elements to put in. The elements of a genre create a scaffolding for us, and that takes away a lot of the obstacles, leaving room for other obstacles, but at least you can knock certain obstacles off your obstacle list.
Okay.
And it might be good to write down what you think are your obstacles, and then you might find out that they're completely different. So obstacle number one that I'm getting from you is genre. And so now we've gotten that taken care of. Sharon, is yours also narrative nonfiction, or is it a biography of these people?
I actually, hold on.
Okay.
I feel that it is narrative nonfiction.
Yeah, that's the idea I got. You saw the questions I asked you back after you sent me the information.
Yes,
were they helpful?
My son flew in on Friday night. So
no.
Crazy.
I'm asking you why you didn't do your homework.
Anyway, this is what you sent me. Is you can see I've been working on it. Was incredibly useful. Are you going to send this out to everybody?
No, I'm going to send it to everybody who sent something to me.
Oh, okay.
And so relax. I wasn't asking for you to respond. My question is just, was it helpful? Because it's important to me to know
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
The other thing is I do have all my materials from this, but they're hard copy. So maybe if this Zoom world goes away.
You mean when it does? Shortly, we hope.
Some point. You know, I would love to meet up with you and, you know, lend this to you or give it to you and let you take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. I'm honored, and we can talk about that later. I want to now build on something you just said. And what you see happening, the dynamic that you see happening between each person I talk to has a little kernel that I build on. I think you'll find that in your writing too, which is why it's so important not to throw anything away, not because someone's going to see it, but because it's filled with goodies that you may not think are important at one stage of your writing, but will
Right.
become very important at another. And then it's like, well, what was it? So right now you just said Zoom thing, which brings me to another down further on my list of obstacle blockers. And I use the word block because writer's block kind of thing. So what I have found with this Zoom thing, which is so horrible in so many ways and so fabulous in other ways, is it has helped me to create PowerPoints that I'm not going to present. I have created PowerPoints as an organizational function for my next book. It's just been amazing. I don't have piles of files. I have a picture that I'm going to use, what I'm going to write about it. My notes are right in the PowerPoint. And so PowerPoint itself, which I've always used in presentations, but which I've really used in a different way because of Zoom, has been a tremendous organizational strategy, and I just can't recommend it highly enough. No one's going to see it. Doesn't matter if it's lousy, but it will absolutely help you organize. There's a place for your notes. There's a place for your images. There's a place for your research. You can put links into it. It practically writes your book for you. And it's just a marvelous obstacle buster. So maybe consider that.
Yeah,
Hi, Judy.
Good morning,
Sorry.
everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can I just interrupt for 1
Sure.
second? When Sharon is, I don't know whether Sharon is done explaining to you, but I'd like to do the same thing with Judith. And if Richard would like to talk about a goal and an obstacle, I think we don't have that many people here that we can't really direct something at the
Yes,
individuals who are.
Lynn, that is my plan. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so Sharon, did you have another obstacle?
I think I had sent to you that too little, too much. And so at some point in our communication, you wrote, you can never write enough. So it really, I want to start at the beginning. And to answer one of your questions, this love story mixed in history is very personal to me because Dot and Tom are my parents.
Okay.
And obviously, if they hadn't fallen in love, I might not be here taking it.
Right.
So with that being said, I want to tell the love story, but I think it's important to establish the characters. And so that is actually where I'm going to begin. And then obviously by establishing the characters, we bring in, well, the Depression, Prohibition, and then after they meet, then World War II. So my feeling is I have all this information. Why not use it? Why not tell the whole story? And then hopefully with the right people helping me to edit this, they're going to say, you know, this is too much or this is too little.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I said the other obstacle for me is always I'm an analytical chemist by profession. Always wanted to be an English teacher and a writer. always, from the time I can remember. And so part of what I did later in my career was work on government documents that for new drug applications. And so very technical, very, you know, this, and this. And so
Okay.
obviously I don't want my writing to sound like that. So
Right. There's a hand up. Whose hand is up? There's a hand up on the screen in Sharon and Jade's box.
Oh,
Okay, moving on. Let me address, okay, fine, it's gone.
is it down?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Sharon,
I
let
think-
me,
Go ahead.
before we move on to Judith, so that we can get some of her obstacles taken care of, I wanted to offer you a scaffold that might be effective organizationally, because as you say, it is your story too. And you're not exactly interviewing these people. You are telling your memories that have facts from research incorporated. And I'm going to suggest that you tell it as a flashback in a way that you say, my first memories of my parents were, maybe there was a picture, something, have that. I remember when I was very little being absolutely entranced by the picture of my parents during World War II or during the Depression. You use a cue to do a flashback. I was so surprised when I learned that and tell it that way. We've already kind of talked about doing it chronologically, part 1, part 2, part 3. Lynn's suggestion was excellent. And then each chapter you can base on an artifact of some sort. Even if it's not theirs, it might be bread lines during the Depression,
Right.
An image of bread lines during the Depression, wherever you're going to start. That your part, you begin with you. How did it affect you? Where were you in your life at this time? Because learning something when you're 4 is different than learning something when you're 15, 30, 40, 50. So it can
Right.
almost also be a chronology of your development, and you wrap up with, and I knew I needed to tell their story because, and I asked you, why. So that might be a way to start organizing it. It doesn't mean it's the way you're going to finish necessarily. We all know, those of us who are writers, we start out with nothing. We beat ourselves up. We get an inspiration. We go with it. Other people destroy it. Then we beat ourselves up. Does it sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
And then we end up with something completely different. So you have to learn to go with that flow, but you need scaffoldings. So I hope that might be a little bit of a help for you.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, great. Good. I'm going to move to Judy now, who wants to write a fable that might be humorous and it might have a lesson that needs to be told. Judy, can you tell us what some of your obstacles might be?
Well, my obstacle is that, I've never written before, I can write and I'm a good writer and inner communication and that sort of thing. And I've written blogs and I've done all this stuff. But this thing is, there's a lot of dialogue. And it's the dialogue, basically it's the dialogue between the characters that I'm really stuck. I have the concept and I have, of the characters all laid out. And I'll write something and then I'll write it in 3 different ways and it can only be a page or a paragraph or something. And then I can't decide which variation of that particular idea should be. And then I get stuck. I put it away. It got me very emotionally. I was very emotionally distressed about a month ago, or maybe even more than that I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I was looking at this thing and all the words were mishmashed, and I was feeling really pressured and depressed, that I
Yeah,
couldn't
I do.
do it.
Yeah.
So I just put it away. I just felt that the best thing to do was just put it away and go back to other things that I was doing, and maybe eventually it would come. But I'm a collaborator. So I feel best when I'm collaborating and bantering back and forth with somebody, especially when it comes to dialogue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the characters are all very different, and it's a very different sound. So at any rate, that's it. Is that enough? That's a whole
Okay.
block. It's a pretty
Yeah.
big. It's a pretty big block. I've had this idea for many years, and it's based on a personal story of mine.
Oh,
And then it grew to, to incorporate a lot of other things.
well, it's new information to me that it comes from a personal experience. And I think that's very powerful because you're invested in it. The thing about writing a story is that we need to understand the genre that we're writing in to make sure it's the right genre. It might be that you're going to instead write a memoir vignette that you incorporate elements of the fable in. It may not be at all that you're going to write a fable. So my suggestion, quick top of my head, is that every time you get an idea to do it differently, go with it. Go with that idea for a while. You don't have to do a finished product, but go with it for a while, see how it feels. My next suggestion is to read fables that other people have done, from Aesop to contemporary fables. You have to familiarize yourself with the genre so that you can see how it's set up, and you can see how other fabulists have used dialogue. So you don't have to come up with it yourself. If you are worried that you're not doing it right, you can see what other people have done and then see what you can do that's similar or different. You can see a fable that's done poorly and say, that's terrible, and do it a different way. So one, go with whatever instinct you have at the moment. It doesn't mean it's the right final one. It means you're exploring it. It will be valuable. And two, familiarize yourself with the fable genre so you'll see what other people have read. There's tons of stuff I checked on the internet regarding writing a fable. Another thing that might be helpful is, do you plan to have an illustrator work with you?
Yes.
So it's important to have a sense of what kind of illustration would be most effective with your writing. And to that end, I would suggest that you also familiarize yourself with the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And Neil will send that information to you afterwards. I have it in the chat if you want to look at the title again.
In the chat.
And so they will have people in that organization that write fables. Is your fable for an adult or for a child?
That's very interesting, because I always felt it was for a children's fable, and maybe not really little children, but maybe 8 to 12, maybe even a little bit older.
Okay,
And,
middle grade.
Yeah,
So now
but,
when someone
but it's
asks
also
you,
been suggested that seniors or older people would be interested in this too. So,
absolutely. You won't know which niche it fits in until you've explored some of those avenues. It may end up that you're going to do it in 2 versions, one for adults, one for middle grades. You don't know that, and you don't have to know right away. What will be helpful is for you to get as many drafts of it down instead of saying, oh no, that's bad, and doing something else. Do as many as you can. And that's for you too, Sharon. If you have difficulty deciding which way to go, just do them all. You're brainstorming. That's the phase that you're in right now, is brainstorming. You can't put too much pressure on yourselves to be writers because you haven't done it yet in this particular format. And that can be crushing. It's like, well, why can't I do this? And I'm worthless and I'm not good. And just forget it, because there are so many truly lousy writers that have been published that even if you are lousy, it could still happen for you. Why not be one of them?
One of the
So
lousy
don't let worries about quality be a block. That's another blockbuster we want to do. Don't worry about quality yet. Editors will help you with your quality. I think the fact that you're a collaborator, I don't know which, is so important. You might want to get a writing partner.
Well, I did have one, and I've written another book, which you know about, but it's a beauty book. It's something that I knew like the back of my hand, but a friend of mine had helped me with it. And she was going to help me, and she's brilliant at dialogue. And she's got a sense of humor that's unbelievable. And then just a few months ago, she couldn't do it. She lives in Seattle. She's overloaded with stuff, and she just couldn't take on one more thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I felt like, oh,
I know.
she worked with me on my other book, and I understood her.
And
If it's all right, I'd like to interject something. I'm just lifting out something that you said, Judith. You said like you knew beauty like the back of your hand. Well, I think what Joanne is suggesting is very, very good about reading fables, reading dialogue, reading other people's work, and sifting through and saying, yeah, this feels right, this doesn't feel right, I can use a little bit of this, I can use a little bit of that. But the more, it's being like an educated consumer. The more you know, the more you're in a position to actually ferret out, when you start writing, ferret out what's good and what's not good, as opposed to, I just have no idea. But this is giving you an idea, just like all the years you spent in beauty and all the years you spent in modeling. You could, like when I talk about my book, I could be awakened in the middle of the night, and I know what I'm going to say because I've said it so many times and it's so close to my heart, and I wrote it, and there's stories that I'm very familiar with, so I'm comfortable talking about it. And likewise, the more information you gain about fables and children's books and looking at illustrations, the more you'll be in a position to be able to sift out what's good and what's not good, and that'll be very helpful to you, I think.
Yes, thank you. It will be. And that's
so in terms of obstacle busters for you, you're going to learn about fables so that you have it at like the back of your hand.
Yeah.
And you're going to try to find a writing partner. Finding one writing partner is not as effective as having a writing group that you belong to, and eliciting people's partnership from that group. Because invariably, if somebody is not able to help, you want to have a backup. So again, I suggest going to the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. See, they have, again, a fabulous Las Vegas chapter, but they have an amazing national body, and they do conferences online. They hook you up with special interest groups. That will, I think, take care of that block, that obstacle. Okay.
Now, what I'm hearing is that the thing is that the writing is a full-time job if you want to be good at it. My problem, she was saying no, because I have another interest as well, and then I get conflicted.
Sure.
Which one I'm going to put my energy into.
Right.
So,
if you were going to be a professional writer, it's more than a full-time job. My sense is that you want to write a fable. And
I want to
maybe,
write this experience, you know, and then
Okay.
the experience just, it grew into something in my head.
yeah,
You know, it was a little thing and then it just grew in my head.
right. And so to write a fable that maybe you would submit to an anthology of fables is not a full-time job. It's something that you would carve out much more easily once you know your genre and once you are connected with other people. Then it won't take all of that time. You'll have the scaffolding to get it done. I know it's so overwhelming until you have a lifeline. So those two things I think will be your lifeline.
I love that
Okay.
scaffolding. Scaffold is a good term.
Okay.
And
Thank
once,
Lynn, were you going to say something?
once you, Judith, once you have a hook, with all these things that Joanne suggested, once you have a hook into the substance of what it is you want to say, the ideas will come. You'll have a structure in your head about where you're going, because you have fodder, you'll have information that you've accrued, not where you are now, but where you're going to be, and the words will come. They really do. You know, when people say, I hear this over and over again, that characters, this phrase, Sheila uses it, my brother uses it, I've heard it over, and Joanne is, characters write themselves. And, you know, you're in a zone and you just go, you know, it's in your case, it's going to be, you know, the animal speaking. It just takes on a trajectory, and you know, you'll see it'll happen. It'll happen. You just have to do it.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, so it's very important for people to determine if they're going to be a storyteller or a writer for this particular project. From some of the other participants' comments during sessions, my sense was most of them were trying to be storytellers. And Sharon specifically is going to be a writer, and Judy wants to do a fable, which in a way is a storyteller. And so to that end, sometimes when you feel that you're blocked, whether you're writing or storytelling, sometimes when you feel if you're blocked, the best thing to do is to tell that part of the story to a good listener who will get it, not a good listener who doesn't get it. It's really hard to find the right listener. And then you might also record yourself if you don't have a listener. Record yourself telling it. Nothing like hearing your story broadcast back to you can help you clarify what needs to be done. So whether you're storytelling, fable telling, or doing a narrative nonfiction kind of biography, that hearing it coming back will be very clarifying. So that's another little trick to get rid of that obstacle. Another thing that can help you get organized is to write an article instead of the book or the fable. Doing it in a smaller batch, like an article, can also help you clarify. Doesn't mean you have to submit it for publication, although you might. Sharon, you might have a fabulous article. You might end up with several articles, the Depression years, the World War II years. If you create it, format it as an article, there are many journals and magazines that relate to World War II. I made a presentation at the Wright World War II Museum in Vermont or New Hampshire, one of those places up there. Part of what I presented is going to be in my next book. I haven't written it yet, but I've got that presentation and I'm using it for my notes. So there are many ways you can go that don't have to be, oh my God, I have to write this whole book. So overwhelmingness can be an obstacle. Judith, if you write your fable in a couple of different ways and work with other writers, you know a few, writers, I am sure you'll get really good feedback. Lynn?
No, I was going to
Oh,
say.
Lynn was raising her hand, and I know Sheila is raising her hand.
Oh, no, sure, sure.
So let's knock those obstacles off. We've got learn your craft. Yes.
I just had an idea for Sharon. I put it in the, in the chat in case people are not going to look at it. You have a perfect vehicle
Yes.
in the art magazine. You know, to write a story. I mean, the art magazine is for people over 50. The other
Perfect.
side of over 50 certainly maybe lived through that period. And I think that would be a great audience if you pick maybe one of the 3 periods you're going to write about and write an article about it and submit it. And boy, if it gets published, that's great.
It.
If
Yeah.
not, you've written an article and you have something in front of you, and maybe you could do it, you know, for the 3 different periods as a jumping off point.
Right. It's perfect. And you'll be a published author.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
I am, but in a technical
Yeah,
field.
yeah.
So that's
Let
But
me
yeah.
speak to that. Sharon, I don't know if you got a chance to download the first chapter of my book, A Victory for Miriam. You might check that out. It speaks to your situation exactly. Miriam, the woman whose memoir I co-wrote, is a scientist. She's published 80 scientific journals. She was a medical school professor. She couldn't tell a story to save her life, but she had a story to tell. That's what I do. I help people tell their stories. We partnered to get her story out. It was like pulling teeth. I would say, what do you remember about the bombing of Warsaw when you were 4? There was a lot of noise, the building shook, we went to a bomb shelter. Done. And I said, okay, in your apartment, who was with you? And that started jogging her memory. We started setting the scene from that. And then I would add a little bit like, oh, your mother was roasting chicken, the smell, the aroma. When you smell roasting chicken now, does it take you back? At one point, she and her mother were running away from a bombing in a village. Bombs were falling all over. And she said, bombs were falling all over. I said, okay, what was the sky like? What did it smell like? And she started pulling those details out that she didn't want to say in the first place. When you have a writing partner or a writing group, somebody will start asking you a question about
right.
the sensory material, the emotional material. So don't let your technical writing be a block. It's your diving board. But please be open to the suggestions of other people. When I would say to Miriam, well, at one point while they were running from the bombs, I said, and Miriam, did you turn back and see the village on fire and the sparks and hear the screams? She said, I don't remember. And I said, but if you did remember, that's what you would have seen and heard. And that's why we call it narrative nonfiction, because
Right.
I was able to add that stuff to her story. So that doesn't have to be a block. You were going to say?
One thing. Oh,
No, finish up with Sharon and then I'll go to Judy.
Go. Sharon?
Sharon, did you have something
one
to say?
thing. Yeah, the Nate's memory that you sent to me. I love this story. And on the back, there was how to turn a memory into a memorable story.
Yeah.
And I love that because it said, think of a historic event that has taken place during your lifetime. And for a lot of people in my age group, the first thing that always comes to my mind is the assassination of JFK.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, in my age group, you knew exactly where you were and what you were doing. And and the questions that you asked really helped me see how you dissect
Oh, good.
or it take a look, what were you feeling? How old were you? Where were you? I was in a home economics class.
Mhm.
It was the first for me and all of these others. It was our first encounter with real violence.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the fact that our president was now dead was just incomprehensible. And then this was on a Friday. When they had the funeral the following week, schools were shut down.
Yeah.
And I can remember laying on the floor in front of the big old console
Mhm.
TV in the box. And I remember, I mean, there's pictures in my mind, and I'm 71 years old. The pictures in my mind are so clear of the funeral procession and John. And I just, anyway, long story short, these questions were, for me, invaluable.
Thank you.
In
I'm
terms
glad.
of breaking it down.
Okay. I thought it was interesting that in your response just now, as kind of a scientific person, you used the word dissect.
Sorry.
I'm going to put formaldehyde on this paragraph. It was wonderful. Okay, Judy, you had a couple things to say.
Well, I just wanted to give kudos to our friend here, Joanne. I didn't feel well over the weekend, and so I had to entertain myself when I was in my bed, feeling sorry for myself. And I picked up your book, Miriam. I read it in a day. I just couldn't put it down. I just got to it. I just loved it. I love her. You made it. It's such a beautiful story. And I just wanted you to know that, I mean, it was just a one-day read. I just, and I had the New York Times right next to me, and I didn't want to pick that up, which I usually do on a Sunday.
Whoa, what a review. What a review. I preferred this book to the New York Times.
Well,
There's your blurb. Yeah, there's your
It's
blurb.
my blurb. Judy, thank you. You just brought tears. Thank you. Now, you're referring to A Victory for Miriam. And, excuse me, and for the, did you already read Women of Valor?
I read it quite a long time ago, and,
Okay.
and I wanted to reread it, but I can't find it. So
I know. So I just wondered, you'd read that book first, my first book first, and then my second book second.
Right.
And that's another thing that happens, Sharon, for instance. I wrote a book profiling 4 women who during World War II had defied the Nazis successfully. It was personal because baby boomer growing up, all I ever heard was the Jews went silently like sheep to the slaughter. And I couldn't believe it. All the books we read, starting with Anne Frank, were death, suffering, misery. And I decided to find out if there had been Jewish heroes because we didn't know about them. Now we're beginning to know about them, but then we didn't. And so once I had finished that book with those 4 women in 4 different voices, I hope, I realized, thank you. I realized that one of the stories, Victor, is it backwards for you guys or is it frontwards?
No, it's fine.
That one of the stories in my first book was going to be a book by itself. And I took one of those stories, Miriam's, which meant I had to work with Miriam again, who I love dearly, but is still a scientist. And I even said to her, Miriam, we're going to do this story. We're going to expand on it, but you're going to have to let me write it my way. I can't argue over every detail because you as a scientist said it wasn't exactly 3 p.m. Or if I say it was the afternoon, you can't tell me it was 1:34. We are writing a story. It's not a report. And as Judy, thank you so much, will attest, it's a story, but there's history in it, right? Every page there's history. You are learning history without realizing that you're learning it. So I don't want to self-promote, but that might be a model, a scaffold for what you'd like to do. Thanks, Judy. I'm sorry you weren't feeling well. Yes.
No big
I'd
deal.
like to, I put this in the chat, but Richard didn't see it. Richard, would you like to ask any questions? Would you like to speak about goals or obstacles? You're such a seasoned writer.
I certainly have a couple um, obstacle breakers that maybe people don't think about. For example, I love getting into my covers behind
Into
me,
your what?
the cover of my book,
Cover, yeah.
cover in the back. So I typically jump into starting the cover around halfway or 2/3 of the way through the book. And that aside, working on the cover just juices me into completing what I'm writing at the moment. The other obstacle breaker that I use is I like to write longhand. I don't want to do it on the computer. I'll do longhand in a notebook, and it'll be brainstorming. It'll be, remember I told you I don't use character profiles? Well, guess what? Character profile stuff ends up in my notebook. The conflicts, the personalities and everything. So they kind of come a little bit after I'm starting to write, but in doing so, it complements sitting down and typing the words.
And then you have it all in one notebook. You have it all in one
Right.
one thing, so you can visually, if you want to. I use note cards. You can literally spread them out or organize it in any way you want. And like I felt so bad when Starlin said that she had been writing. I'm just so sorry she's not here today. She had been writing and she wrote a lot of things and she just threw them away. I mean, like broke my heart because sometimes just an idea from a whole page, you can just lift out one phrase or lift out one idea and you go, oh, I have a whole different place to put that. And it's your own words, like my granddaughter once used the expression when she was very little. She was being troubled by something. She said, I feel screaming inside my head.
Oh,
I wrote that down. I have it in my phone as a I actually have it right here. I have it in front of me. I have quotes that I put in my phone. I
write down phrases too.
And I type them up. I have it right here in front of me, quotes. And Olivia's quote is right there, screaming inside my head. And I just thought that was huge. So, a thing like a good life is a collection of happy memories. That may be trite. That may be a trite phrase, but from there you can, I can do that. I can use that. So there's nothing to be, nothing to be thrown away yet because, because any one of it can be a kernel for something else.
And I want to point out that my notebooks are not organized. I just start writing and I may jump to another idea, And I like it because it helps me. If I have a remembrance of something I wrote, I have to read other stuff that I wrote to find it. It's not an outline, it's not in any kind of order, but it just reminds me of all the ideas that I've had. Now, both the notebooks that I wrote for the 2 novels I wrote, maybe 30, 40% of it, or probably a little less, got into the book. So you can see there was a lot of brainstorming and ideas that don't get there, but they help you think about things. So
Yeah, and they can end up in a different book,
Right, right.
which what happened with me. Sheila, is your hand up?
Unmute yourself, Sheila.
Are you muted?
No, now I'm not muted. It takes me a while to find the little arrow to unmute. So I'd like to say two things about obstacles. First of all, we all have obstacles that we create because we want to avoid doing what we really should be doing. So all the obstacles that we think about are things that we have created. There's no requirement for anything other than to sit down and write. And so if we think we need a partner to write, or if we think we need a writer's group to write, or if we think we need a computer to write, or if we think we don't know how to write dialogue, so we can't proceed until we know how to write dialogue. These are all obstacles that we have created to avoid doing something that could be painful or tedious or reveal too much about ourselves. So those, I would say that that's like something that I always have to remind myself whenever I think, oh, I really can't do that right now. Because, I mean, unless you're lying with the wheels of a truck on top of your body, you really could do it. You really could. And so one of the ways in which I fight obstacles, because I am a huge procrastinator, I really should write a whole book about the art of procrastinating, but I don't want to encourage anybody else to be a procrastinator, is that I will pick a time, and this time it's going to be November 1st to November 30th, which coincides with National Novel Writing Month. I have done that successfully 2 or 3 times in the past, and I will write every single day. And I will just sit down and I will sit there. And if all I write is, I don't know what to write, you know, like in The Shining, you know, every good boy does fine, or whatever he wrote. You start out by thinking, all right, I'm really not going to do this. I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And then pretty soon you think, well, that's a little boring. So maybe I'll just write one sentence. And you start and you write. I had a character. I didn't know what she was going to do that day. So I wrote what I did that day for her. So I will do that. I will write what I did that day and put it in a character's form. I will write what I read that day and put it in the thoughts of a character. And I will just keep going. If I get to the point where I'm actually advancing the plot, good for me. If I get to the point where I'm actually developing a character, good for me. But I will keep going for the 30 days or however long you want it to be. It could be 5 days, it could be 6 months. But I think you really have to get over the idea that the obstacle is real. The obstacle is not real. It is not tangible unless I said you were in facing some dire physical issue. And we just have to forge ahead. This from a procrastinator. This from a true procrastinator. So I would say forge ahead.
Thank you, Sheila. There were 3 points that were brought up. One, I want to get back to Richard's and say, regarding covers, you know, if you're a writer and you're going to be using a cover, it helps to start thinking of what would be on my cover, because that should be whether you're going to do the cover or a professional, just thinking about the elements of your cover will help get a little bit of organization. For Judy, just thinking about the elements of the fable and how an illustrator might draw them will help you organize. I'm showing you this because some years ago, I was telling my granddaughter, who was 12 at the time, about Miriam's story. And I said she was just like David, and the Nazis were like the Goliath, and she was out there in the forest, and she was, 6, 7, 8 years old. And my granddaughter said, "Excuse me for a minute," and she disappeared. And I thought, how rude is that? I'm just telling her a story and she's taken off. And about a half an hour, she came back with a picture of a little girl with her back toward the viewer, facing a huge swastika. So I still get chills when I think about it. This 12-year-old kid not only got the story, got the elements that I hadn't even thought of yet, and did a sketch. When it was time for the cover, I found a professional to render my granddaughter's concept into the cover. So cover can be important even if you're not an artist. Somebody out that in some social event, a cocktail party, might ask you what your story's about. You have to be ready, or it's helpful to be ready. If you have a 30-second elevator pitch, a 60-second elevator pitch, a minute elevator pitch, meaning that between the ground level and the first floor, you've got to spit out everything that you can in an organized fashion to a publisher who might want your book. That way you can distill the elements that are important in your work. As we were talking about before, there are obstacles that you can use our obstacle busters for. But as Sheila said, much of it is mishigas, craziness that we are doing to ourselves. I'm not good enough. I don't have time. I don't have the money. Some expert will see it and tear it apart. Nobody will like it. It's endless. You can be such a creative writer about your excuses. And then you can go back and check them off. Because as Sheila said, just do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Which is really antithetical to most of our points of view. Okay, I had another point, and being a baby boomer, I've just forgotten it. Lynn?
I just wanted to go back to the cover thing. I wanted to, this is the cover from my book. I knew the cover before I knew what I was going to do. I knew I wanted something Las Vegas. I wanted something that was eye-catching. I knew there was something that sign is like, everybody in the world knows it. And I knew what I was going to say. I had my ex-brother-in-law take out the welcome to Las Vegas and change the wording. We got the copyright rights to it. And I knew that that's what I was going to do. And I never thought I'd live here. It guided every story guided that. And then that guided every story. So I do think a cover is, sometimes becomes your vehicle.
It does. And a phrase that you just said, I never thought I'd live here, can become the organizing feature for that kind of book. So,
well, that's what makes it different. That's what makes anybody looking at the cover, oh, okay, it's a book about Las Vegas, so what? But I never thought I'd live here, so
it's a grabber.
Room, yeah, puts it in a different room.
Oh, how true it is.
Your story also.
Yeah. So, all right, we've given a lot of material. I don't know if today's been overwhelming or not. Sharon, do you have like a last question, comment?
Oh, excuse me, Starlin is here, the person that I
Yeah,
said was missing the most.
here.
Sorry.
Hi.
I got in late from Houston last night and the time change.
It's okay. It's okay. I was sad that you weren't here because we're talking about goals. We're talking about the goals of writing, and then most of this has been about the obstacles that come in our path and what we could do about this. So if you want to take a moment to just settle yourself, but I'd like to, I'd like you to get something out of this. So I'd like you to think about what some of the what your goal for the book, for what you're going to write. We have an idea about what it is, and then what some of your obstacles are, and maybe Joanne can help you through it like she's done the other people. Okay, so I'm glad you're here. I'm sorry, Joanne, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was excited that I saw Starlin.
Starlin, are you muted?
No,
Yeah.
I'm
I
here.
just got dogs, so yeah.
Did you get the material that I sent out?
I just kind of saw the email. I've been out of
Okay.
state, so I'm a little
Okay,
behind.
no problem. I'm not
Okay.
doing this. I just want to know where you may be at this point. Okay, and so maybe just let us know what one of your obstacles might be. And you've got some really powerful writers here that can throw some input your way.
I'm just in the beginning process, so I'm just overwhelmed, like how I even want to approach the book. I always thought I wanted to do a memoir. Then last week got me thinking about fiction, which I never thought of myself as a fiction writer, but it made sense.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just my thoughts are everywhere. Like kind of just starting to I used to not put things on paper, so.
Okay, so I think once you go over those materials, some of those issues will be resolved. And I think, Neil, are you going to send everybody a recording? And so don't worry, you're going to get a recording of everything that we've talked about. So
Okay.
just,
Of course I will, yes.
you know, kind of relax. You're going to get it all when you're, you know, when it's convenient for you to go over it.
Okay.
We talked last week, I made this suggestion that you do it as a narrative nonfiction, where you tell people stories based, and you were doing the recovery part, which is different. It's unique and it's so needed. It's so important. And I suggested maybe a recovery, a fictional recovery group of survivors, and they would tell their story in that group. And you would have one person be the facilitator, and that would be like the narrator. That would be you.
Okay.
And so I think that might be a helpful, the word I've been using is scaffold. It might be a helpful scaffolding for you to start getting your thoughts together.
Okay.
I think once you get them down and realize they're going to be revised, they're going to get put down again, they're going to be revised, nothing that you do is final. Even after it's published, you're going to look at it and go, why didn't I do these 50 things? How did the 16 proofreaders that I paid miss that typo? So, you know, you got to kind of mellow out with it. And the more intense the topic is, the harder it is to mellow out, because you're doing more than one thing. You're, in a sense, you're providing your own therapeutic environment to work through the issue. And that's huge. And it's hugely overwhelming in and of itself. But the writing of it might be kind of therapeutic for you, because you will organize it. You'll be in charge of it. I wrote a short story, a very personal short story about the end of my marriage. And it took me 35 years to write the story because it was too painful. Until I came up with a really creepy approach that I'm not going to inflict upon you. But let me say it turned out to be a murder mystery. And by putting the other person as the victim instead of me, I took charge of the narrative. I brought in facts, but I was able to end it any way I wanted. It got to be fun. It was horrific. The original story was horrific, not like yours horrific, but horrific in my life. It turned out to be fun. And not that yours is going to turn out to be fun, but it's analogous in that once you take charge of the narrative, it gives you power over your story and over your memories. And so you're doing much more than one thing. It's doubly overwhelming. So understand that and don't feel like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, because then you're victimizing yourself twice.
Okay.
So I hope that's helpful. I hope my materials are helpful.
It is.
Okay,
And,
Lynn?
So Starlin, I wanted to say one of the things that came up, and you'll see it in the replay of this, but just to make it relevant now, one of the things that came up, a suggestion that was made, was to do some short stories, to take any one of your any ideas that you have, and don't think of it in terms of a whole book, a whole novel, a whole memoir, a whole telling, but just one story, and you segment one story, and maybe you can then do another one, and maybe the format of your book can be, as Joanne, suggested, to be a series of stories or articles that you then weave together with stories of October 1st. And you even suggested submitting a story to a newspaper or a magazine, maybe waiting till next October 1st, because there was a lot of stuff in the newspaper about October 1st. And unfortunately, it's something that's a very visceral thing for many of the survivors. And it might be a very timely thing for you to do that. And then
it is. I was just in Houston. My son does BMX National, so it's a huge thousands of people race, and they had a very we're from Texas type security. They were GTI defenses. Well, this whole place had only one exit twice. There was acres with one exit, and then the parking lot was with one exit because they want to control the money going in and out. And there was lightning, and they were trying to get people to funnel through. I lost my kid again because but this time it was a trigger all over again. There was the lights and the noise, and it was with kids this time. So it was like Route 91, there were kids, but a handful. There's thousands of children with bikes, kids getting lost left and right. So it was, and the guy's like, and I kind of went up and I lost it a little bit. My PTSD gets triggered. And he's like, this kind of stuff doesn't happen in Texas. And I'm like, do you know Sutherland Springs? It's 2 hours away.
Oh,
People just don't get
they
it.
don't. They don't.
So that could be the entree to a
Yes.
story. Just what happened this weekend, get it all down on paper, bullet it, get your little thoughts down, don't worry about the spelling. And then you go ... brought me right back to October 1st. And then you go right in. And that's, again, a real life thing. It's
Okay.
one of those things that you keep in your head, you write it down, you don't know where it's going to go, but this is relevant to you. I'm just so glad you're
Exactly.
here. Okay, great.
Great.
Good,
Exactly.
good.
Relative to that, because I'm a Holocaust educator and a Holocaust author, my life is steeped in that topic. And I grew up steeped in the stories of people I knew who were Holocaust survivors. And so while I was just growing up, a regular American kid with hula hoops and Mickey Mouse Club, I also had this cloud always of the Holocaust and the nightmares always of the Nazis were going to find me. That continued until I was in my 40s. And so there's always a double layer going on when what you're writing about also, it parallels your own trauma. And I wrote a story one time about standing in line at the grocery store. You can be triggered at any time. There I am at the friggin', grocery store, looking at the garbage that the person in front of me was buying and thinking, what kind of person feeds that garbage to her kids, ... And I looked around and we all were depressed. We were all in line, and I was back at the train station in Warsaw in line to get on that train to Auschwitz. You never know when you're going to get triggered. And so use those triggers when you can as the beginning of a flashback. That way you kind of get in charge of your trigger. The first time I noticed that, I was I was a West Coast swing dancer, and my partner and I were in line to register. And this was maybe 30 years ago, before I even started this work. We're standing in line and I'm perfectly happy. I'm going to be dancing. And he says, does standing in line remind you of concentration camp? Well, that blew my entire weekend. I was like, what? Why would you say that? And he thought he was being like sensitive or something. People don't get it. You have to be protected with boundaries, and you don't have, they grow in time. That wherever you go, you can be triggered. So more power to you. I think you have, within this group, you have people who are absolutely willing to help you along the way. So don't be shy. And I think for Sheila and Richard and I in particular, and Lynn, we are so dedicated to helping other people reach a goal on the way to reaching their goal with writing. And I hope you find it. I hope Judy and Sharon and Jade and Starlene find that this is a safe, knowledgeable, and nurturing place to be. So I think we're going to, Judy, did you have a final wrap-up point? Question, comment?
Well, there was something, but it's gone. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
was
no,
so intent on listening to you. I did have a thought, but it went by.
Same thing. And Sharon, did you have a wrap-up point?
No, just that first of all, I can't thank you all enough for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us, because it's been incredibly useful on so many levels. And I think when we first moved out here full time, I actually tried to find some writing groups here in Las Vegas and thought about, you know, they had a schedule of their meetings and where they were meeting. And then I froze because I thought, oh my God, you know, I had samples of my writing from the classes and from after that doing it on my own. And I thought, you know, what if these people laugh at me? What if they say I'm a horrible writer? You know, all those things you don't want to hear. And so this whole experience here is just so delightful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. To your point, I always was a writer. I couldn't do anything else. So it wasn't like, oh, hi, I'm a writer, brag, brag. It was like, it was the only thing I could do. But I didn't know what to do with it. So I didn't. I would, you know, do little writing things, but I didn't know what to do. I was so intimidated by real writers. And when I first came here, Summerlin, I live in Las Vegas, and we have a community called Summerlin, and they had a women's group, Summerlin Women's Group, and they had a Dare to Dream grant. And I thought, what the heck, brand new life. Let me apply. I don't have a prayer because I'm not anything. So I wrote a little essay about my grandmother and how she got out of Europe before the Nazis, but her family didn't. So, and I grew up with her stories. I just wrote a little essay about that, and I submitted it, and I was one of the winners. I was stunned, and it came with $1,000, which isn't a lot, but I didn't have any money. And it allowed me to go to a writing conference in LA, where there were workshops for everything you need to know.
Oh, wow.
And I had an absolute panic attack. There's like 2,000 people. I'm going to be the dumbest one there. It was totally debilitating, the panic that I had, but I got through it. And I was kind of like, hey, I got through it. And then I said, but the next one, it will be terrible. You won't be good enough. So my suggestion for that obstacle is just do it and say, yes, I'm going to be terrible. They're going to laugh at me, and I'll put it in my comedy routine. Just do it. The Las Vegas Writers Group, the first time I went, I was shaking. And I even knew 2 people there. I was shaking. I was so afraid. And then I found out half of them had never written anything. Wherever you end up, you will probably end up with people above you and below you. And inevitably, you will find someone who, like Goldilocks, is just the right size for you. So Las Vegas Writers Group, Henderson Writers Group, and any online. Lynn?
Yeah, I'm going to make a pitch for Richard's class that he facilitates.
And Richard's class, yeah.
At Ollie, it's writer's critique, and also when I was just collecting my data for the 50 states book, I had no idea what I was going to do with it, and I remember Sheila saying, why don't you do this? And she explained to me the procedure. You have three pages of your work, and you have to copy it, and you have to submit it, and everybody takes a look. Everybody looks at it, and you read it aloud. I'm going, oh God, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I feel confident enough to do that in front of a class of we had about a dozen people who were certainly far more along in the process. And you know what? Richard was great. I never felt intimidated. I never felt like anybody was even the severest critique was kind, and it was focused, and it was very, very helpful. I read at that time, I read selections from that I had written from the stories, and they had wonderful suggestions about whatever they suggested. It was very helpful to me, and I loved going. I enjoyed going, and I always found the time to cut and paste the section that I wanted to read, even with the second book that I not the second book, second manuscript that I'm still working on. But it was very helpful. And I think when, I'm a great believer. I always used to say, when you ski, everybody's in a good mood when they ski, because they're happy to be there, and they're on a mountain, and they're in Tahoe, or there's some beautiful place. You don't get nasty people on a ski slope. Well, when you find people with a commonality, whether it's a lot of people I know are teachers, a bunch of teachers, there's a commonality. So there's a kind of a safety net. There was nobody in that class that was out to get anybody. Some people were better than me, just like Joanne said. Some people were better. Some people were not better than me. Some people had no interest in what they were writing. Some people, it really connected to me. But the process was sharing and listening and learning and becoming little by little a better writer. And it was very helpful to me. I think I did it for 3 semesters, and it was very good and not at all threatening. So I think if you find any group, there's going to be support. There's going to be support for what you're doing. And I think that it takes the feeling of dread out. You may have it in the beginning, but you realize, like that expression, everybody puts their pants on the same way,
I think what Lynn has said about Richard's class in particular can generate to life itself. That may not have been what you had in mind.
No, it is. I talked about it. Yeah.
To life itself, because when you learn in a writing class how to give suggestions constructively, how to listen to suggestions without putting up your fists and defenses, those are 2 skills that really are valuable in life, not just in writing. And so I think we all have that same recommendation.
Does Richard do this all the time? Or
Yeah,
is
I do it every semester. The next semester in the spring will be on Zoom, so no commute.
Oh, wonderful.
Anywhere you want to come from, and you're all welcome. I'd love to have you.
Can we get that information included, where we can go and find specifics included in the email that comes out?
Yeah, I'll send something to Neil.
Okay.
He can coordinate that.
Great. That's the upside of Zoom. Again, it's obnoxious in some ways. Like I just saw a Zoom with about 300 people that a friend of mine was putting on. And one of the women in the audience, I'm not kidding, did not have pants on. You got to have a monitor with you really quick to know when to shut off video. As she started to stand up, I was going, oh no, for my girlfriend who was giving the presentation. Oh no, oh God, yes.
Yuck.
So something that, for instance, Neil does when he's doing these sessions is he makes another person or 2 the co-host, so that there's always somebody watching to see if somebody's video has to be shut off. You don't want to pull a Jeffrey Tooman, to coin a phrase. And if you don't know what
pandemic, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
First of all, between wearing masks, a lot of women said, forget it, I'm not putting any makeup on. The other thing is there's now this huge in stores and online for leisure wear.
Right? It's a whole new industry.
Exactly.
You go outside and you see people dressed top and bottom. It's a shock. So, all right, you guys, let me tell you a little bit about the project I'm doing, because it's very cool and I'm very excited about it. I was contacted by a documentarian in Washington, D.C., who is a musician and a writer. It's like, what can't he do? And a mutual acquaintance who knew what I did and knew what he wanted to do put us together. And what he is doing is creating a documentary based on intergenerational transmission of trauma, based on Holocaust survivors' stories. And he wanted to interview pairs of Holocaust survivors with their grown children and perhaps their grandchildren. And from those interviews, he would then create personal songs for each of those people and a dialogue where their song stories would cross. Maybe there was frustration. Why didn't you tell me what you went through? I was trying to protect you. It becomes almost an opera. And our mutual friend knew I was close with several survivors and their families. And so I was able to hook them up. And this was as of last Thursday. We're doing the first one at 1 o'clock today with local survivor and his daughter. And then and we're going to do another one tomorrow. Then the documentarian goes to LA to work with two pairs that I was able to connect him with there. And I won't be with him then, but this should be astonishing. He showed me a sample of his work because I said, I'm not going to get involved if I don't know what quality. I can't ask survivors to meet with a stranger who might not know what he's doing. And so he showed me a sample and I couldn't continue watching it. It was so powerful. I had to stop. So this is what's on deck. The reason I bring it up, not bragging, but because you never know when there's going to be a contact for something else. You never know when a project's going to fall in your lap, which is why I used to tell my high school students, get your homework, lie to yourself. Say the deadline is 3 days earlier, because if you wait to the last minute, your one true love will ring your doorbell and you'll have to say, sorry, I've got to do my homework. I can't go with you. And that'll be the end. So make as many contacts as you can. One of my goals had been to create a theater piece from my first book. People everywhere, why don't you make a play? I had a theatrical person here. Yes, I'm on it. Everybody dropped out. It was like Little Red Hen. It never happened. And this documentarian, because I'm helping him without pay, said, once I have this in the can, we're going to do a play based on your book. I hadn't even expected any quid pro quo, but holy moly, if I could live long enough to have my book made into a play, wow. So yes, wrapping it up, unless there's last comments. What a pleasure this has been. Thank you, Lynn and Neil, for inviting me to do this. Thank you, Sheila and Richard, for being part of it. And Judy and Sharon and Jade and Starlene, thank you for having the courage to follow your passion on this. It does take courage. And I think you've got what it takes.
Thank you
So
so
I'm going to
much.
say goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Appreciate it so much. Appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank
Good
you.
luck on this documentary. Let us know how it goes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So stay safe, everybody. Be well. And I'm sure we will meet again.
Thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So I on that same line we talked last week also, not last week, the week before, Carol, who spoke about marketing, talked about connections, about making connections and how important that was. So just on that note, one of the things that I did, and maybe some of you heard me say this, one of the things I had the idea for the 50 States books to contact realtors and to talk to realtors about including the book in some kind of a welcome package, because it's a love story to Las Vegas and people all came from different places. So that was good. From that, I met somebody who invited me to a Las Vegas chamber event where there were a room full of business people. I'm not really good at going from person to person, but I met a few people. I had 5 or 6 cards. Came home, I waited a little while. I called some of the people. A couple of people bought a book, and 2 of the realtors called me back and asked me if I'd like to do a podcast with them. So I did two podcasts already. The theme was moving. It was done from a from a realtor's point of view about how great it is to excuse me, to live in Las Vegas and to move to Las Vegas. And these are all the wonderful things about Las Vegas. Here's this woman who wrote a book about Las Vegas, about people who came from all different places. He gave me 20 minutes on the podcast to speak about it. And I had headphones and a microphone, and it was very cool. Sheila and I went Saturday to the book festival. We sit down at this presentation on romance novels. It was a nice thing to do. We're sitting in front of a woman who just opened up a bookstore in Henderson. We start talking. Before we know it, we exchange information, and Sheila and I have a gig to when we want to go and to do a book signing. And you know, these things you knock yourself out with a lot of things and phone calls, and you know, we're talking about being a full-time job. Writing the book is a full-time job, then publicizing the book is even more of a full-time job. But you just never know, you know, you throw a lot of things against the wall and you hope that a couple of them stick. And 6 months later, something comes back to you. And, you know, that's great. I'm here as long as I'm alive and the book is viable. I can do it anytime. So you just never know when you put something out where it's going to land, where it's going to end up. I'm not telling you that these little things have made me, you know, a New York Times bestseller writer, but they've given me some trajectory and some entree into the world of books.
Now, I thought I was through, but because of what Lynn just said, when I helped a survivor write his memoir, people read it in Europe and in Yellowknife, Canada, which is an inch below the Arctic Circle on a globe. He ended up being invited to speak in Yellowknife. He was on Canadian national television, where the Yellowknife schools, which are based on many islands, the kids have to fly in on Monday and fly out on Friday. They flew him in and had a 3,000 person audience, and all the kids and their parents were flown in. They saw him in the airport, like this big was the airport, and they're all indigenous, and they see this, you know, old guy, and they go up, "Are you Mr. Lesser? Are you Mr. Lesser?" And he felt like a celebrity. They organized a dog sled ride. He had to go out in the middle of the ice and eat raw fish. I mean, no more kosher. His whole life changed because of that book. He was invited to speak in Germany at the trial of Nazi war criminals who were his age. Yeah, they were his age. They were all in their 90s. He's been all over because of one book. Okay, now I really am through.
Also, Ben Lesser is a wonderful, wonderful speaker on the Holocaust. He came to a school that I was in, and he spoke for 2 hours. Just the experiences that he had, and it was the same stories, but a different thrust. And people who were survivors, the whole Jewish community here, there are about 75,000 Holocaust survivors in Las Vegas, which is amazing to me. They all have a story. They all tell a story, and they feel it's their mission. For people who never wanted to talk about it, it's their, you know, I'm sorry, my statistic is not right. 75,000 Jews, not so many Holocaust survivors. I was off on the number, but there are many. And for many years, they didn't want to talk about it. You know, they all had the commonality. It was this horrible thing that happened. I built my life. I don't want to talk about it. But then there was a resurgence, and there was a need to do it, because to educate people, and his foundation, the Shoah Foundation, never again never again. And that's his whole purpose. He has these little pins that he puts, that he gives out. And it's just, it's a service. They see it as a service. And it's just such a, it was another wonderful book. A life that matters, right? That's the name of it. A Life That Matters. Yeah, it's a great book, great book. Well, I see it's 11:29. We talked up the hour and a half. Anybody have anything else they want to throw in? Throw into
I just wanted to think, we talked about the mentor, like reading books, other books. It struck, remember we did Lucy Conkin's mentor text?
Yes,
Well,
yes.
it made that huge connection. You always start with the mentor text. So I've already read two really, they're on women who survived like sexual exploitation, that trauma, but it's like seeing all these different perspectives, it really makes a small story like significant. Like,
That's
so
great.
I thank you.
And as a teacher, you weave in all those things that we all read about topics to become more knowledgeable about topics as teachers in order to teach, in order to understand different techniques. So thank you for that.
Thank you all. Thank you all. What a
Thank you.
inspiring, heartfelt meeting.
Next week, we have also a wonderful author, Terry Emery, speaking about, she wrote several books, but the one that I liked the most was a book called Second Acts. And it's told in three women. It's told in three different, the chapters keep alternating. And it's a story of women who went to college together, their experiences, where their lives took them, coming together and always keeping in touch, and the second act of their life, which, for many people, a second act is better than the first act. So that's next week. That's Terry Emery. And then the following week, the last week on the 8th, my brother Gary Goldstein, who's a screenwriter in LA, just released his first novel called The Last Birthday Party. He's going to speak about choosing a publisher, about how to go about finding a publisher. So I know you're nowhere near that, but this is all valuable information for when you do finish, whenever that is, and you have this whole world of self-publishing, hybrid publishers, and publishers that come to you. I don't think we're in that category, but maybe some people are. He will give you information about how to go about doing a search. And we're putting this, these sessions are all recorded, so you can see them again. I like to put them on a website. If people have objections to their portion at the end about speaking, you let us know. I think you have to sign a release if it's okay. If not, we're not there yet, but something Neil and I talked about, maybe redoing the workshop. There's so much valuable information in it. And, the objective is really to reach people, like Joanne said, to reach people, to help people. If the 6, 7, 8 people here got something out of this, and, go forward, and we've inspired you, and I've learned, and everybody, you can always learn and be a continuous, continual learner, as we say in education. So thank you all. It was another great session. Thank you, Neil. And anybody else want any closing remarks?
Yeah, my dog has to go. Bye. See you later.
All right.